What's up, everybody? D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we are going to be doing the 20th episode of Godzilla-Thon. If I did this consistently, this would have been 20 weeks in, but, this is like, months late than it should be. But anyways, it doesn't really matter. Today we're going to be covering one of my favorite Godzilla movies of all times. This one is 1989's Godzilla Vs Biollante. I want to give a quick shout out to the best movie company in the world, Hollywood Video. Thank you to Hollywood Video, that old shut down movie rental company, because my VHS of Godzilla vs. Biollante comes from them, and that is all I own the movie on. That doesn't change the fact that I love it, but that is all I own it on, is that old Hollywood Video VHS. To be honest, it's not even a Godzilla vs. Biollante case. It is a black, completely solid black VHS sleeve case, and then on the side stamped is Godzilla vs. Biollante, and on the front someone wrote in black Sharpie Godzilla, but they spelled it wrong. They spelled it Godzil, and that's it. So I guess technically they wrote Godzilla and then verse B, and it's just a B. But it's pretty funny. So I don't know. This movie was really overlooked by me, and a lot of people overlooked this one. It is fantastic. So most people watch this movie and they're like, it's slow. It doesn't have crazy action sequences every 5 seconds. A lot of people don't give this one the time of day. Do it. Go back. I challenge you to rewatch this movie and not enjoy it. It is so good. Like, oh man, and it is the perfect Godzilla sequel. This one is like the most direct sequel to any Godzilla movie that I can think of. Like, this one so directly follows up the events of Godzilla 1984. It is fantastic. I am reviewing the English cut, but that doesn't really matter. So the movie starts out. Oh wait, before I even get into the plot, I just wanted to say, kind of going back to what I was saying, I overlooked this movie for years. I didn't like it. I thought it was boring. I never really understood what was going on. I just generally found it dumb. I didn't think it was one of the better Godzilla movies. But then around 2015, when I did Godzilla-Thon, I don't quite remember if that was my first year doing Godzilla-Thon or not, but I've been doing Godzilla-Thon for a couple years now. But when I got to 2015, this is the standout year for me. I know because of the girl I was talking to around the time I watched this movie. That's kind of the way I base my time frame for Godzilla-Thons off of, is who I was friends with at the time. And I just remember 2015, it was towards the middle-ish / end of the year 2015, I really got into this movie, because I remember watching it on VHS, or at least having it playing almost every day after I got home from school, and then I'd always be texting her. So I guess that's my personal connection to this movie. Is this I don't know, I just really got into it around this time frame. It's around the same time frame that I really got into Destroy All Monsters, and I was really interested in Neon Genesis Evangelion for the first time. It was around that time frame. So I don't know why this one jumped out to me so much, because back then I really never paid tons of attention to it. Like, I didn't really watch the plot of the movie, like pay attention like I did this time. I think this is actually the first time I've ever paid attention to what's going on in this movie, and I walked out of it just being blown away by how good it is. But way back then, I don't know what it was that jumped out to me. It could have been the fact that this was one of the first Godzilla movies I ever had that had real movie trailers play before it, and has a movie trailer play before it on the VHS that I have, of a pretty big movie that never took off. It's called The Opposite Sex and How to Live with Them, or something like that. Something about that trailer also always jumped out to me. It's a movie starring Courtney Cox from Friends. She's also famous for movies like Scream. She's a very famous actress from back then. But she's in this movie. Now, I don't know why the trailer jumped out to me so much, but something about it, it's just, I don't know, it's super non-traditional for how trailers are done. Like, it's the characters sitting down and talking to the audience. And it always jumped out to me, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to watch this movie, is because it has real trailers play in front of it. And something about that, like usually when you watch a Godzilla movie and it's on like the DVD or whatever from like the 50th anniversary collection or whatever DVDs you have, they typically just have Godzilla movie trailers in front of them. But this one has an actual other movie. It's kind of the same way that Evangelion trailer jumped out to me on Destroy All Monsters VHS. Also, I think that one also might be from Hollywood Video, but so I don't know. It's just something about the fact that a Godzilla movie had trailers way back then in 2015 really kind of jumped out to me, and it made me go, all right, well, this was a mainstream kind of thing. Like, I can get behind this. So something about that made me want to watch the movie more. There's no real reason for it. I can sit here and like attempt to figure out what it was that made me want to pop this movie in just because it has trailers in front. It's not like I watched the trailers either. I'd skip the trailer and just get into the movie, but I don't know. I just find that kind of funny that that was the thing that made me, kind of sold me on this movie, and it was like, you know what, I'll give this one a shot, and there's no reason for it. Like, I cannot think of a logical explanation for why I did that, but I guess that's enough about my personal background of the movie. It was a standout for 2015's Godzilla-Thon, and it's been one of my favorites ever since. And then I watched it recently, and I was, like I said, freaking blown away. So, the movie starts out with Ifukube's Godzilla music. One of the best things about this movie is that they use that music, and they use it well, man. They use Ifukube's music. Ifukube, I don't believe he was the composer for this movie. They have a different guy do the music for it, but that other guy really took inspiration from Ifukube. You hear Ifukube's influence in some songs like Bio Wars. Some Super X themes kind of have that Ifukube feel to them. But then you actually have the legitimate Ifukube music, and it is so damn good to hear. We haven't heard it since Terror of Mechagodzilla, and I know that is only 2 movies previous, technically, but the thing is that Terror of Mechagodzilla music is really bogged down and very heavy music. This is like Ifukube's great, very fun, and at the same time menacing Godzilla music. It's fantastic. Some of Ifukube's best songs are used in here. You have the Monster Zero March in here. You have Godzilla's classic standard theme. It's just absolutely amazing. I love it. I'm so glad they brought it back. And it's used, typically, it's used at the right time. So we start out, immediately it's playing through the 1984 recap of what happened in Godzilla 1984. Like I said, I'm reviewing the English cut, but 1984 is one I'm going to go off because I'm doing the Japanese continuity with Godzilla-Thon. Now, we have a recap of Godzilla 1984. So this was actually, back in 2015, my only exposure to Godzilla 1984. I'd seen Cinemassacre's Monster Madness review of it. I had heard Zazubar's Godzilla Palooza of Godzilla 1984 by then. And, of course, my dad talked about it quite a bit, but I had never really seen anything of it. So when I got to watch Godzilla vs Biollante around, like I said, 2015, and it starts out with that recap, all of a sudden I realized, oh man, this is that movie that I've been looking for years and years and years and never been able to find. So I really got interested in, like, all right, I'm going to pay attention to what goes on here because I have not seen the movie. But I really like the fact that it recaps so that the audience kind of knows where we left off. Ends off with Godzilla falling into that volcano. So Godzilla is still in Mount Mahara when the movie starts. This movie, one thing that this one does really well is it only takes place hours after the last movie left off. You literally start out with the military going in and cleaning up Tokyo after Godzilla's attack. So some soldiers go to salvage the Super X, which is also great. They go in and dig it out of a building with some cranes. Of course, Godzilla last movie just shoved a huge building right onto it, so they had to go salvage the remains and, of course, the bodies. And this movie doesn't really dive into a lot of the death toll or anything like that. It kind of focuses more on the scientific aspect, but that's one of the great things about it is we have movies like Godzilla 1954 that have been followed up with Godzilla Raids Again. Granted, not a good movie, but you really feel the impact of what happens in the original 1954 movie because you hear about the death toll and how Tokyo is just still this just completely wiped away town. This movie doesn't really get into that. We start out, of course, we're in Tokyo right after the destruction happens, but we don't really talk a lot about how many people died or the casualties or anything like that. We mostly, like I said, focus on the scientific aspect, which brings a new, fresh light into the series because we never really dive into science as much as we do in this movie. And the Heisei series is known for two things. Number one, continuity. It keeps fantastic continuity, and a lot of people have problems with the continuity. I'm going to disprove those problems as I've done in the Godzilla Timeline Explained videos. I'm going to disprove them next episode as well. So don't worry about that. We'll get there, but the Heisei series is known for having a really generally good continuity. It is also known for being the most scientific Godzilla series that we really have to date. A lot of the emphasis in this movie is placed on science, and a lot of emphasis in this series is placed on the scientific impact of Godzilla, which is something very new and very original for Godzilla, and we never really get that again. We get a little bit of influence with that in the Millennium series and a tad bit in Shin Godzilla, but we never really dive into it like we do in this series. We don't even begin to scratch the surface of that with the 2014 movie. We basically just say, there's big monsters, they're a thing, and then we leave it at that. Where in this one, it's you really get into a lot of Godzilla's biology and very good stuff. So, some different soldiers, they scout for Godzilla cells, so they're scouting for like skin chunks of Godzilla. One of the groups of American soldiers finds some. The American and Japanese soldiers have a big gunfight / chase over these cells. I believe they're called G cells. I don't know if they're called that in the movie. I think they're just called Godzilla cells in this movie, but I believe eventually they'll go on to just be called G cells as an abbreviation. A strange assassin shows up. He kills everyone. He kills the 3 remaining American soldiers after this big gunfight breaks out. A professor's daughter, Erica, is killed. So what happens is this agent, who we don't know where he's from yet, but this assassin presumably gives the Godzilla cells to this scientist, and the scientist is running tests on the Godzilla cells. A huge explosion happens at the laboratory, and his daughter is killed. We find out what happens at that laboratory later on in the movie. So she's killed working on the cells as the bomb goes off at the lab. Miki Sagusa, our big, huge, kind of overarching character for the Heisei series, is introduced in this movie. She's a telepath. She's really young in this movie, so she's called into action 5 years later. So now the movie takes place 5 years after 1984. Obviously, that was just to try and keep it up to date with when the movie was coming out. But Miki Sagusa, she is introduced in this movie. She's really young, not very good with her powers yet. As the series will go on, she'll get really hardened and trained with her abilities up until the last movie when she's kind of not as able to use them anymore because of her older age. But she is a telepath. She can communicate with Godzilla, and she can do some other really interesting things. One thing that we don't really ever have in Godzilla movies is the supernatural element. We have it with Mothra and the Shobijin, however you want to pronounce that, and then the Earth's cosmos, as they're known in the Heisei series, but we never have that again. We never really have a supernatural element up until GMK, and that's it. So it's interesting to see this supernatural kind of superpower introduced into this series. It's much like when Friday the 13th in Friday the 13th Part 7 New Blood, all of a sudden we're introduced to a telepathic character named Tina. It's kind of like that, where the series has gone on for so many years, they introduce this new kind of change to it, which is a supernatural character other than the main villain, which in Friday the 13th is Jason. In these Godzilla movies, as of this point, it's still Godzilla. So Miki Sagusa is called into action to communicate with some roses because for whatever reason the professor has this strange suspicion that his daughter Erica's spirit is inside the roses. And Miki Sagusa, she kind of says like, "Nah, I'm not getting any readings from this plant. There's nothing going on here." Because I guess she's supposed to be able to speak to plants. I guess they explain like, yeah, you didn't think the plants were just plants, did you? Like, they have to communicate with one another somehow, and it's done through these kind of telepathic, like, mind waves. Not necessarily, I don't think they're brain waves like we always get in the Showa series, but they're, like, telepathic ways that these plants communicate with one another, and so Mickey's able to speak to them because she has the ability to, I guess, connect to those telepathic those telepathic readings, and she's able to understand them. So we see some international spies all watching the professor's house. Like I said, this is very science oriented, so these spies are trying to figure out information on what's going on with this professor. Obviously, he has experience with Godzilla cells, which is what kills his daughter because of the bomb. So they're all trying to figure out, like, is anything important going on with this guy? There are great real-world effects to Godzilla's appearance with Godzilla Memorial Building and an international science tensions. So that's not like an international science convention. That's like international tensions over the scientific breakthrough of Godzilla's existence, which is a thing in this universe from 1954 till now, but now they kind of make it a bigger deal of like, now that there's a Godzilla back and alive, this is groundbreaking for science because we can now study it. And it will lead to a lot of new advances, obviously, because technology is 30 years more progressed than when Godzilla originally shows up in 1954. So, really interesting. Like I said, there's a great scene where you have some characters eating dinner in this memoriam for Godzilla victims. You see a giant building, like a giant, it's like a big platform that has one of Godzilla's footprints in it. There's a bunch of like tributes all over the walls to people who died. There's a whole bunch of little things here and there throughout the exhibit about Godzilla's attack in 1984. Really, really great. You see that in the real world a lot, so I am super impressed that they put that in this movie. Like I said, this movie is fan-frickin-tastic at being a sequel to a pretty dark movie. It follows that up really well by giving you the same kind of after effects of the tragedy. Now, Mount Mihara, we find out, is ready to erupt, which is not necessarily a good thing because that could potentially lead to Godzilla getting out of the volcano. Like I said, he's left down there because they blew him up last movie, knocking him into a volcano. All telepaths dream of Godzilla's resurgence, so this is a great scene. This one also really stuck out to me from 2015's Godzilla-Thon. This was one of the big scenes in the movie that sticks out to me. So Miki Sagusa and her telepath friend in this movie, the older telepath, they go into this school teaching younger kids who have these abilities, I guess, how to use these abilities, and they walk in and they all say, like, what'd you dream about? And Mickey's like, yeah, I had this dream, the same dream that you did. And so they walk in, they say, you drew pictures of your dreams, what'd you dream about? And then all of a sudden it's revealed that the telepaths had the same dream, all the little kids. They're all dreaming of Godzilla coming back and destroying a lot of stuff. You see really cool art, like all these little kids' drawings of Godzilla, all these little kid renditions of Godzilla. Some of the art is actually really good. Like, some of it's is pretty spot on, and then you get the original Ifukube Godzilla music theme flare up when you see all these pictures. It really stuck out to me from 2015, just being like a great reveal of what's going on with all these kids, and really foreshadowing Godzilla's, like I said, resurgence, if you want to go that route with Shin Godzilla's alternate American title that was never used. So we meet General Gonzo. He strangely has a Godzilla 1962 model in his bedroom, or I don't know why I said his bedroom, but it's like his office, his work office. He strangely has a model of Godzilla from the 1962 movie King Kong vs. Godzilla. I guess, that's supposed to be just a model of a generic what Godzilla looks like, but it's very specifically the 1962 design in the background, which technically shouldn't exist in this universe. If he was going to have a design of Godzilla, it would have to be one of three things: the 54 design, 84 design, and I guess technically they don't know what Godzilla looks like in this movie, but assuming that in continuity, like in this Heisei universe, Godzilla looks the same in every Heisei movie, and it's just that the suit's changing, and so the audience notices he's different than he was previously, but the characters don't. I guess you could try and explain it like that, but I don't really think that's the case here. I think that's just Godzilla legitimately looks different every movie, because he also acts different. He also can do things like with his body physically that he wasn't able to do previously. I guess you could explain that as maybe he's still mutating and slowly turning more and more irradiated into this more messed up monster, even though I think the more radiated he gets, like, the better he looks. And eventually they'll make it plot points of Godzilla's design changes with movies like King Ghidorah as well as Destroya. So I don't know I always took it when I was littler as maybe Godzilla falling into the volcano turns him into a different design. Like maybe he burns away into this newer design, or maybe he turns more radiated as the series goes on. For the Showa series, I never really thought anything of it. I thought, okay, well, there's no real overarching story here, so I guess there's just a different Godzilla design every movie, and it's just like they're not going to bring it up because there's no overarching story. It's just Godzilla every time. But in this series, that's so focused on continuity, I always made it like a deal in my brain, like, all right, well, this is explained somehow. It's got to be, but it's not. So we see, like I said, we see him. He has this weird statue of 1962, which, like I said, should not exist in this universe. So Mickey locates Godzilla in the volcano. She finds out that now he's awake and moving around. He's trying to get out. We found out that the Americans are the ones who bombed the laboratory at the beginning of the movie, killing Erica. We also find out that the anti-nuclear bacteria, which is this thing that the scientists have been trying to produce the whole movie, is now like actually being produced from Godzilla's cells. Anti-nuclear bacteria is like the ultimate weapon for multiple reasons. Number one, it takes away most of the threat, most of the long-term threat of a nuclear weapon. Yes, a nuclear weapon has the ability to level a city and melt people entirely and vaporize everyone, but the long-term effects of a nuclear bomb, being this radiation, is no longer a deal now that they have this anti-nuclear bacteria, because they can just put that in places and it'll eat away all the nuclear radiation, leading to a sustainable land source. And it's this advancement in science done for the betterment of society, but people are worried that it'll be somehow weaponized and turned into this terrible thing. It'll also be used to take away the threat of a nuclear bomb, which, like I said, it shouldn't. Like, they should realize, okay, well, the fireball itself, as well as the shockwave, is going to be powerful enough to still do the damage even without the radiation. But they make it like they're really worried that it's going to fall into the wrong hands, and that's a big thing in this movie, is terrorists trying to get a hold of it so they can do their own thing with it. Mount Mihara erupts, there's an earthquake, starts to shake Japan. Dr. Sharigami, who's the professor throughout the whole movie, who I've been talking about, this is when we find out his name. Dr. Sharigami has a feeling Erica is still living inside this rose plant, so he actually infuses Godzilla's cells into the Erica rose in order to try and regenerate it. I don't know what he's really thinking. That's just, I guess he's like, I guess my daughter can be infused with Godzilla if she she doesn't want it, but I'm going to make her. So he does it. He infuses her cells with Godzilla, turning her into Biollante. So the Super X2 is built. It's pretty cool that they basically took the design of the original Super X and really improved it, because I guess they saw the events of what happened in 1984, and they were like, all right, well, we can't let that repeat, so they really fix it. It has new features, new armor, a new design. It's green now. It fires back. It fires back Godzilla's atomic rays now, which is going to give them a big upper hand in fights. A firefight breaks out in Sharigami's house over his research. It's between the Seradian agent, who's kind of been popping up throughout the movie, the assassin killing people, and some other people from different scientific organizations around the world trying to get a hold of Sharigami's research. Biollante shows up in a first stage, which is kind of like this tentacle, and she winds up killing multiple of the people. She kills 2 of the 3 men. Mickey has a vision about a giant rose. A company threatens to release Godzilla out of the volcano if the anti-nuclear bacteria isn't sent over to these people. Biollante transforms into a 100-foot tall rose with large vines. They're living vines, and they kind of go around and hiss at people. An arms deal is interrupted. So this arms deal is between the Japanese government, who are really afraid of these terrorists, holding Japan hostage, using Godzilla as this kind of threat, saying, we'll turn them loose on you guys if you don't do what we want. So they're afraid of these guys, so they go to turn over the anti-nuclear bacteria. So it's kind of like an arms deal, but the Seradian assassin jumps out. He kills the people who knew how to turn off the terrorists. He kills the terrorists, so now the switch can no longer be turned off to stop Godzilla from being released from the volcano. The Seradian agent gets away with the anti-nuclear bacteria. Now the volcano goes off, bombs go off at the volcano. Godzilla is released. The government loses, like I said, the government loses its anti-nuclear bacteria. The Navy ambushes Godzilla, who kills them all. Super X2 launches an attack on Godzilla. Because of its new reflector beams to Godzilla's atomic breath, they actually somewhat win the fight. They are able to hold them off for long periods of time because, like I said, the front of the Super X2 opens up into this reflector dish, so when Godzilla blasts his atomic breath at him, it kind of charges up the dish and fires it right back at him. So every time he uses his atomic breath, he's getting hit with it. And he doesn't have any physical attacks that he can do to the Super X2, so he has to resort to this atomic breath, which just keeps backfiring on him and backfiring on him. And anywhere he tries to go, they show up and fire missiles at him until he fires the atomic breath, and then they fire back at him. So they really got him beat in this movie. They really have the system down on how to beat Godzilla. And if it weren't for the Super X melting on accident, like if it weren't for the reflector dish not being able to hold up to a certain amount of blast from the atomic breath, they would have won this fight, which I find really interesting. It's just like in the original movie, had the Russians not accidentally set off that nuclear bomb above Japan, the Super X won. The Super X with the cadmium missiles would have won. They would have beat Godzilla, which I always find really interesting is how the Super X's in these series always have the upper hand on Godzilla, and it's through some sort of unlucky mistake that Godzilla is able to win. So the military claims Godzilla is advancing on Tokyo in order to close the airports so they can keep the anti-nuclear bacteria in the country. This is also a very, very interesting thing. It's a very good political decision that one of our main generals makes in the movie. He decides, he's a Super X pilot, he decides because the bacteria can't get out of the country, otherwise it's going to compromise everything that they did with the research on G cells. They actually decide to lie to the Japanese public, which we see a lot in modern day, of the government lying to the public in order to try and clear something up or make something look better in the public eye that the country did to try and condone its acts, which I find really interesting, that the fact that we get that in this movie too, with the Japanese government lying to its citizens in order to protect from this international terrorist threat. Biollante overcomes Erica's spirit. Now Erica's spirit is completely gone and Biollante is in control. Biollante attracts Godzilla to the, I don't know what bay it is, but she attracts him to some sort of bay. Super X beams melt and Godzilla lands some really good shots on the Super X, forcing them to retreat. Now the Super X is in very badly damaged condition. Godzilla makes landfall and advances on Biollante. Godzilla kills Biollante with the atomic breath. Her tentacles try and attack him. She's still in this rose form at this point in the movie. Her tentacles attack him. He fires his atomic breath, and you see great scenes where he's decapitating these tentacles, and heads are going flying. He fires off all the rose petals, and it's like this little mouth on the inside. And then he eventually blows up Biollante, and this big orange goldish spirit goes up into the sky, and Shiragami basically says, "Uh-oh, Biollante just turned immortal." I don't know why he assumes that, because she doesn't. She dies at the end of the movie, but he's like, "Oh, she became immortal." And I guess it's somewhat true, because she does come back to life after this point. But Godzilla wins this first fight, no problem. The telepaths locate Godzilla swimming away from... he goes to find nuclear energy. They locate him swimming away from the bay in order to find some. The military loads up... they load up at Nagoya, so Godzilla can basically, they assess, alright, Godzilla's in this location, the closest nuclear power plant is in Nagoya, he's going to make landfall there in order to get his energy and eat, but actually Godzilla basically turns away from the military blockade and ambush, and he heads straight to Osaka, which is super interesting, the fact that they're like, oh, every single troop we have is in Nagoya right now. We cannot do a thing about Godzilla heading to Osaka other than get 5 people there, and that's not going to go very well. They really messed up, and I love that, because the military strategy in this movie, although, yeah, it's the right call to do to go to Nagoya, it's the most logical decision, Godzilla still outsmarts them, which is great. So Mickey attempts to communicate with Godzilla and basically tries to turn him around, but actually doesn't really succeed. She winds up passing out. I guess it somewhat works because Godzilla doesn't kill her or sink the boat she's on. He just turns away and swims away. The Japanese take the anti-nuclear bacteria back. They get it back from the Seradian agent, not Asian. One of the most impressive scenes of this movie that always sticks out to me is this amazing scene of the Seradian agent looking out the window and viewing Godzilla start to attack Osaka. Godzilla's right in front of him, and he's like literally the street in front of this building, and the guy's looking out this window. It's a great shot, very, very huge window. This dude is just standing there looking out, and then he turns around and walks away, and he just goes, "God damn," or whatever he says. And Godzilla starts to destroy Osaka in the background of the scene through the window. It is incredible. The special effects in this movie are so amazing. So, it's just such a good shot, and Godzilla starts to attack Osaka. There's one of the best shots of this movie. Now, supposedly, the Godzilla suit was too heavy to move through the city, so what they actually did was put the city on a platform and move it around Godzilla. So when Godzilla's walking in this fantastic undershot of Godzilla slowly walking through the city, explosions are going off by his side, he's destroying everything. It looks really amazing. Supposedly, the way they did this was by putting the buildings on a platform and rolling them towards Godzilla and keeping the camera steady and just having the Godzilla suit move side to side, making it look like him slowly walking through the city. That is, if that's true, that is incredible. The special effect is seamless. It looks amazing. So Godzilla destroys Osaka. The Super X's pilot, by the way, he's really great. I really like that character. I don't remember his name, but he's fairly good. He's pretty memorable despite not knowing his name. So is Gonzo. Gonzo's a pretty great character. Super X2 fights Godzilla. It doesn't really win. Gonzo sacrifices himself in order to launch the anti-nuclear bacteria into Godzilla's mouth in order to weaken Godzilla. That's their new plan, is basically if they can get Godzilla to consume the anti-nuclear bacteria, it's going to eat away the nuclear energy inside Godzilla, forcing him to kind of go haywire and basically shut down. Really, really smart plan. Again, the scientists here, now whereas in Godzilla 84, the scientists were completely in charge. They were the only ones who knew what they were doing. The military just basically got creamed in that movie. In this movie, a very science-based movie, all of a sudden we have kind of a reverse, or not necessarily a reverse, but a nice middle ground where the scientists and the military work together in order to come up with these plans, and it's very interesting. So I don't know why they did that. Usually in Godzilla movies, they have the scientists be the competent ones and the military be the ones who just get killed in tanks, the cannon fodder. But in this movie, they kind of have everyone pull their weight here, and it's really interesting. So Gonzo sacrifices himself. He loads up the bacteria in this RPG and fires it straight into Godzilla's mouth. So then the bacteria goes off, and it eventually what they hope it'll do is devour, like I said, all the nuclear energy inside Godzilla. And Gonzo sacrificing himself is pretty great. He has a pretty good one-liner that deals with cigarettes or something like that right before Godzilla kills him. We don't see him die like straight up. We just see Godzilla destroy the building that he's in, kind of like what we see in other movies like GMK. We never necessarily see that chick in the hospital die. We just see Godzilla's tail slap the room she's in, so she's probably dead. But we never actually see it on screen like we do with later in this series' next movie, like we do with Shindo's death. So a plan is put in place to raise Godzilla's internal temperature so that the bacteria can breed and consume Godzilla's radiation faster. Another great thing that they do with the science is bringing up the fact that bacteria only breeds in certain temperatures. Godzilla being a cold-blooded creature, hanging out in the water primarily, his temperature is going to be lowered. So what they do is they lure Godzilla to this kind of testing ground for electricity. It's for like a lightning test zone. They bring him there so that they can ambush him with maser tanks and all this crazy stuff to intentionally get him to blow stuff up so that his internal temperature will raise. So Godzilla is he does exactly what they plan. He's attacked at like I said, at these like lightning generators. All of a sudden Biollante spawns in out of nowhere from the sky or from the ground or wherever she comes from. I don't remember. It was like 2 days when I watched this movie. I'm sorry. But it's a pretty great scene when Biollante shows up. Godzilla and Biollante fight. Biollante, Godzilla's blasting off for her tentacles. She's biting him with all of them. She's making him bleed. He's making her bleed. There's a scene when she like impales Godzilla's hand, Gamera 3 style, straight through the hand, crucifixion style. It's pretty brutal. Godzilla's bleeding everywhere. It's not like Godzilla vs Mechagodzilla style blood, but it's like you see spurts, not like crazy like you see in Godzilla vs Mechagodzilla or the late Showa series, but there's some stuff there. It's more like 2014 where it's there, but it's not necessarily like at the forefront of what's going on. Godzilla blows up Biollante's red gooey middle, and that doesn't really work this time like it did when she was a Rose. This time she has this new like atomic breath style ability where she spews acid all over him using her tentacles and her big huge crocodile mouth. Now she's no longer a Rose, she's her final form, her famous form, the one on screen right now. That big huge, as people call it, like Little Shop of Horrors kind of form. And she fights Godzilla. Pretty fantastic fight. It's not very crazy like a lot of the fights that a lot of Godzilla fans want. It's no destroy all monsters or anything like that. It's pretty mellow compared to a lot of that stuff, but it's very cool to watch nonetheless. I really enjoy this fight sequence. If you couldn't tell, like I said at the beginning, I'm a big fan of this movie. So the bacteria takes effect. Godzilla retreats. Biollante dies. She floats up into the sky in that golden mist. Erica is freed. She now separates. Shirogami is shot and killed by the Seradian assassin. And Godzilla winds up killing the Seradian assassin, I think. I don't remember how he dies. So he either dies by Godzilla indirectly, like Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster style, or they actually do kill him, I think. Maybe they blow him up in one of the lightning stands. I don't remember. I'm sorry I don't remember that detail. It just kind of slipped my mind right it. I didn't write it down in the notes, but right as I was trying to come up with how he died, I know he dies, but I don't remember exactly how it happens. But Shirogami is shot and killed, but he ends the movie happily. He's like, yep, I get it. You know, we stepped out of line when I tampered with science, when I created Biollante, but you know, now that we know when man steps into conflict with nature, monsters are born. We gotta learn, we gotta change, and then he's killed. So it's a pretty good ending for him. His character arc's done. Godzilla swims away. The end of the movie. It's a great movie. So let me break it all down for you. Human stuff. Super interesting. Just one of the most interesting human stories of Godzilla history because it is so focused on like the scientific aspect, and we never really focus on it this hardcore. It's great. I don't know why you wouldn't be interested in this human story. It's fantastic. It's solely focused on Godzilla. You feel his impact from minute one of the movie, from what happens last movie, and you never stop feeling Godzilla's impact. This one's all about him, despite him not being on screen the whole time. Biollante is great, so the monster stuff is great. When Godzilla's on screen, he's amazing. The Godzilla attack on Osaka is one of my favorite of the Heisei series. Like I said, Biollante is pretty cool when she's doing stuff outside of her Rose form, when she's killing those people in that laboratory, and when she's in her final form, she's pretty cool. The music is pretty good. The new music's fine, but the Ifukube music really amplifies this score, makes it really good, makes it better than what it would have been without that. Special effects wise, it is just a masterpiece. I really don't think any of the special effects don't hold up. Even Biollante's design is super new and creative for Godzilla. We never see anything like that before. We never really get anything crazy like this again. And just the crazy wire work that goes into puppeteering each head and making Biollante move. Very, very impressive. The special effects in this movie are top notch. So I really, really, really recommend this movie. It is, I can't recommend it enough. It's fantastic. I can't say that enough. It is just, like I said, the standout Godzilla movie from 2015. I know before that point, I never bothered with this movie. I thought it was dumb. If it was on, I was not paying any attention to it. 2015 hit, and all of a sudden I got pulled into it. Even I want to mention Godzilla's design really fast. Godzilla has a new updated design. This is Godzilla's most standard design. We see this design carried over throughout the whole Heisei series with only minor differences. My favorite Godzilla design of all times. Not necessarily the 89 suit itself, But the general Heisei design itself is my favorite Godzilla design of all time. Maybe Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah has a better design. I'm going to have to watch the rest of the Heisei series to figure out which movie has my legitimate favorite Godzilla design of all time. But the 89 suit is fantastic. We don't have Godzilla's ears like we had in the last movie, or at least not that I noticed. But Godzilla's eyes have a lot more realistic look to them, which makes them look a little more cool. His face has a new sculpt. His body generally is the same. The dorsal fins generally are the same. Tail's a bit longer. He's a lot more muscular in this movie. The face, though, doesn't look dumb at all. It looks very scary, very, very menacing. He has those great dragon fangs. The mouth is really realistic now with a nice tongue that moves a lot more than the old ones do. The teeth, he has new teeth where they're like real teeth, where they're not like Shin Godzilla, just little spikes, like little golf teeth sticking out of his mouth. They're like actual teeth where they're three-dimensional, they're full, in-depth, and he has multiple rows, I think. It's really good stuff. So Godzilla's design in this movie carries on throughout the rest of the Heisei series, other than minor differences. Like, the one thing about this design that I don't like is there's certain angles when Godzilla has a dorsal fin on the top of his head that looks really awkward. It sticks up pretty high, and it shouldn't. Luckily, the angle that I used for the picture that I based off for Godzilla-Thon, the thing that you guys are all looking at, doesn't have that. So, I don't know. Godzilla he looks fantastic in this movie, and that great design carries over, and it makes the Heisei series very, very, very good. So, guys, I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. It blew me away. I was not expecting to like it as much as I did. I really should have paid attention to this movie before this point, because it's fantastic. Like I said, 9 out of 10. Go check this one out. If you haven't, or if you did a long time ago and you remember not liking it, I recommend going back and re-watching this movie just to give it a shot, because it is... Definitely watch 1984 or 85, whichever version you own first, because it'll make you appreciate this one more, because this one directly follows that one. But you're doing yourself a disservice if you haven't seen it. I know this movie's kind of making a little bit of a comeback in the Godzilla community. It's very underrated, but recently a lot of YouTubers have been giving it the praise that it deserves, as I have tried to do here. So go check this one out. You will not be disappointed. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. D-Man, out.